Sezno. Okay, story time. This is the time that I realized that I wasn't special. This sounds ridiculous, but allow me to explain. I'm not special for making music. I'm not special for thinking that I'm good at making music. This is not a negative realization though. The energy that one uses in thinking that they're special can and should be put towards more productive things. First of all, I'm not gonna say the names of anybody in this story because I don't intend to disparage anybody. The main character of this story is me and my ego. There is another person in this story who I don't speak positively of, but I'm not trying to insult them. I don't actually know this person that well, and I have not spoken to them really since this story took place. But there is like a before and an after in my mind since I met this person about how I carry myself and how I direct my energy in more productive ways. This took place about 2 years ago. I was living in a different city and I was working a job that, let's just say, was music oriented. It was an establishment that centered around the enjoyment of music and alcohol. This is my favorite job that I ever had. Like, I worked there for a couple years. They took such good care of me and I learned a lot in this like pivotal period where I had a lot to learn. When this story takes place, I was about to move out of the city. So the people at this job knew that I was leaving. I had a bunch of duties at this job by the end that they had like gradually entrusted me with. And towards the end, they were having me get involved with, let's just say like management level stuff, but only for a couple months before I left. So I didn't do it long enough to like learn all the ropes. Had I stayed for a few more years, I'm sure that would have changed. But it was the kind of work that in that early phase of my doing it, it required a short leash from my boss because I was like 23, 24, still learning how to do shit. And I was kind of just like filling in for another person anyway, on top of all the other stuff that I ordinarily did there. So one day, about a month before I moved, I was hanging out at this spot on a day where I wasn't working. And this person who I had never met before introduced themselves to me. Age-wise, my best guess is like late 40s. Age is really the only detail that matters here. This person seemed very extroverted, personable, friendly, and notably, they already knew who I was. Either that or they knew who I was immediately when I told them my name. They introduced themselves to me as my replacement. Not my replacement in every avenue of my job because, like I said, I did a lot of different stuff there. But specifically my replacement in that like more higher level stuff that I was doing just for a little bit. The first conversation with this person, I remember it being pleasant. I remember thinking that they seemed like a very nice, cool person. We must have talked for a little while, and they asked me as I was leaving if we could do a phone call in the near future where I could give them some of the rundown on the work, the protocol, the way things are run, you know. Like this wasn't work for a corporation with like defined training. It was like very hands-on DIY type shit. So obviously I said, absolutely, like I'd love to do a call later this week or whatever. To give some important context on where I was mentally at this point in my life, I was about to move out and start afresh in a new city. And my primary objective at this point was to begin serious pursuit of my work as a solo musician. I was in a phase where I was like learning to fall in love with the hustle because I was embarking on this like huge new project that I had to adopt a new mentality for, a more productive, forward-thinking mentality. I basically had nothing to my name and I was mad insecure about it, but was actually now aware of the problem and kind of motivated to do something about it. So when I met this person, they left quite a first impression on me. A person who seemed very confident, like a go-getter. Somebody who like knows who they need to talk to in order to obtain information. The impression I had of them was that they were a lot older, mature, and they had their shit together, which was honestly inspiring for me to see at that moment. Somebody who like works hard and works smart, a person who seems like they're a few steps ahead of everyone else. So this first impression was bolstered all the more on our first phone call, which lasted several hours. I was just in my apartment for this, like pacing around the room as I do on the phone. And through the course of the call, right, I learned a lot about this person who apparently had had like a decades-long career in the music industry on the more organizational side and also as a musician, like a real performer. There were many different impressive sounding things that this person told me about themselves. Oh, I organized a party for this band. Oh, I'm friends with this guitarist. Oh, I went on this tour. I ought to mention though, there were many people who appeared in these stories that this person was telling me who I had heard of. I'm not gonna name them here or nothing, but like they're people who you'd probably have heard of as well. But I certainly had never heard of the person who I was talking to. We eventually had, I believe, 3 phone calls, and they were all pretty long. And truthfully, my opinion of our interactions soured further with each phone call. I think I started to feel this way when we talked about work, which is what we had planned. where I feel like it soon became an extended series of criticisms about the work that I did, which I definitely can admit. Some of it was totally fair. And this person clearly had a lot of experience and insight that I didn't have. But it was also true that a lot of what they said was really not that meaningful and even unfair, because I did my job according to how I was told, and also accounting for they were still teaching me how to do it. I was no expert, and also I was about to leave. I felt like I was being judged to a standard that this person had, which nobody else at the job had ever imposed on me before. I've never been perfect at any job, but none of what I was being told by this person actually came from my boss or any of my other coworkers. This person was telling me all this stuff just because they wanted to, and a lot of what they touched on was just like not in my control. So this like unsolicited performance review from this person who I barely knew, a person who literally had no authority over me at this job. This lasted for hours over multiple calls. Over and over, I found myself saying things like, yeah, I hear you, but I've never been allowed to do that thing that you're telling me about. Yeah, I hear you. That is a great idea, but we've just never done it that way here before. Yeah, I hear you, but take it up with the boss, because the boss always wanted me to do it this way. None of this shit was confrontational. I wasn't getting screamed at over the phone, but there was a tone of condescension that I had trouble ignoring. After a while, it felt like I was being criticized just for being young and inexperienced. And I kept up the conversation as best I could, but I didn't really know what to say. And admittedly, my ego didn't like that. It got worse when it was revealed somehow, I must have said something, that I was a musician. This is when I realized that I was just kind of being talked at, and that it maybe just felt good for this person to do that. To this day, I'm an, unsuccessful musician, but even more so then. And this person pounced on every opportunity to point out something I was doing wrong. Thence to tell another story about things that they had done in the same room with another reputable person who I'd heard of. I paid close attention to what was said, and there were unquestionably helpful knowledge bombs that I took note of. But by the second or third call, which were planned under the pretext of further work discussion, they became this person talking for minutes on end and me just listening, feeling more and more bitter and unpleasant by the minute. Here's what you're doing wrong. How come you don't know this? You're not serious if you don't know this. I could hear in their voice, right, that they had said these same things to 100 other musicians before me, and that there was literally nothing apparent about me to convince this person that I was any different. Now, it may be that I was imagining some of the tone in the conversation, because like I mentioned, I was confronting insecurities in this period already, but it takes a lot for me to be turned off by somebody's vibe, and I don't think I was mistaken there. When I look back on it now, I know that I thought I deserved some kind of respect, and that my own opinion of myself was enough justification for that. So talking to this person was like running into an immovable object. I felt very keenly that I didn't have, and I wouldn't have, this person's respect, and that made me uncomfortable. This brings me to the moment that this has been building toward, where still on the phone, this person asked me up front, why do you want to be a musician? Which interpret that question how you will. But I think for any musician, this is kind of an impossible question to answer, no? Without sounding stupid or full of yourself or falsely poetic or whatever. I don't know why I even bothered, but I did my best to answer. Probably I owed it to my pride to try to prove that I wasn't insincere. And I can't remember verbatim what I said, but I also don't remember what they responded either, because it's not a relevant part of the story. I said something along the lines of, this has meant something to me for a long time, and I've seen and felt and tried enough to know that I have something here, and I know that I can do this. Whatever I said, the place that it came from was sincere, but essentially it was me saying, I think I'm special. And as whatever I exactly said was leaving my mouth, I had something hit me harder than most things have ever hit me. Or I understood truly for the first time that I was not special for thinking that I was special. And also that I couldn't possibly ever convince this person or anybody else that I was special just with my words. Everybody thinks they're special. That's the terrific irony of all of this. This is actually what unites us all. Not everybody is special, but everybody thinks they're special. The difference between all of us, though, is to what degree and how you convince the world around you that you're special. There are those who assert that they're special by talking about it in vain to other people. And then there are those who have actually entered into the consciousness of others. and the world around them by actually doing it. They have convinced other people without those people realizing it. They did it with their actions. It is a weak ego that needs to assert and validate itself all the time by talking about itself. The strong ego knows that those are only ever just words, and it sits down and it shuts up and it gets to work. I realized in that moment that me and this person who I was talking to on the phone were actually no different. They were trying to convince me that they were special, just like I was trying to do the same, except they were just older and had accumulated a deeper, more impressive sounding rap sheet. They were working and trying to earn my respect, which they wouldn't need to do if I had ever heard of them. So they had to settle for criticizing my job performance and name dropping bands when on paper, they and we kind of had the same job. I ended the phone conversation soon after somehow, and I might have spoken to them one more time after that, but never again once I moved. For all the advice that they gave me in this brief relationship, some of which I have retained and made use of, the biggest piece of advice that I left with was like inadvertent on their part. I will quickly mention that I found some of that person's music later. So now I know why I was frustrated all the time whenever talking to somebody about my music and like feeling misunderstood and feeling like, damn, I probably just sound like another dumb, broke, untalented musician to this person, because talking about it doesn't help you. And the attainment of success hinges on more than just feeling pride and hiding in this like safe nest of untested potential. I resolved to never be that person in my 40s or whatever that has to maybe earn respect by name dropping a few people I knew who did way more than me and waving cherry-picked credentials over a person way younger than me. So yeah, that's the story. Nobody is special for feeling special. Has something like this ever happened to you? Leave a story, I'd love to read it. Thanks for listening if you got this far. Much love to you all. Cheers.